China talks about peace, but on the other hand, it is also fueling Russia's war economy. So the question is that is China really a peacemaker, or silently it is waiting for Russia's decline, Russia's defeat to take advantage of this? Let us decode this entire China's power broker game in the Russia-Ukraine war. Now we know that 2022 is when Russia invaded Ukraine, and since then full-scale war is something that has taken place and is going on in the European continent. In this context, right from the beginning, when Russia attacked Ukraine, China has been projected as a strategic partner by Russia. Beijing, on the other hand, has avoided direct mediation. It also has continuously talked about the need of bringing peace in the region as well as at the global scale. Overall, we can see a kind of conflicting, what you can call as conflicting message that is coming from Chinese leadership. On the one hand, it claims to be a neutral party, and on the other hand, also it seems that it is trying to, we can say, trying to basically blunt the blow of sanctions on Russia's economy by providing it help in various ways possible. Now, if you look at the China's diplomatic position here, obviously at the global scale, whenever China has come to meet with the European countries, their leaders, as well as even in US, it has stated about the voice of region that should be heard as far as the end of this particular war is concerned. The rhetoric, obviously, we are seeing all time is about the need to bring peace. The peace talk should be, basically you can say China is claiming that peace talk should go on. And also it has appealed from both the countries, Russia and Ukraine, to start negotiations to end this crisis as soon as possible. On the other hand, China also has not shown any interest in taking an active mediation role, because China does not want to put itself in the position where it has to clearly justify and also clearly explain its stand as far as the support to Russia or Ukraine is concerned. What is the reason behind this? The simple reason is because China wants to avoid accountability that will come if it actively takes a role of mediator in this particular war. So the biggest question is that China today obviously is an economy that is basically, we can say, parallel to somewhere the Western countries, especially European countries, and it is also even threatening the hegemony of United States, which is currently world's largest economy. So what is the reason that has led to China remain cautious in this particular situation? And this particular caution is believed to be based on the strategic calculation of Chinese leadership. For example, responsibility for outcome. If suppose China take a role of mediator, but it did not, or it is not able to properly lead to such kind of discussion, negotiation that can end the war, in that case, China will be held responsible and it will be construed as a failure which has not led to any kind of final outcome as such. Secondly, also China is able to avoid open side taking. Obviously, it talks about the war should end, peace should prevail, but at the same time it also provides China opportunity to not take side, either Russia's side or the European side. Also, it is able to balance Russia and West, because on the one hand, obviously China has increased its trade relationship, bilateral trade volume has gone up with Russia, but also at the same time Chinese economy is strongly interlinked and entwined with Western economies. There is so much investment flowing from the Western countries, Western companies, which China obviously do not want to put it at risk of. And overall, it helps China in also preserving the global image. Now the question is that as far as the China-Russia economic linkage is concerned, so this is something that we can understand is China has been able to provide an active support in the war-torn economy of Russia. For example, in the post-sanctions, when we know that Western countries and US specifically put a very heavy sanctions on Russian economy. Due to this, the crisis seemed to emerge in the early years. We have seen the decline of ruble vis-a-vis United States dollar. Also, the overall import volume at the global scale of Russian crude oil and natural gas also saw a significant dip. It is this time China came to the help, and a lot of, not only about buying of oil and gas, but also it is believed that China is supporting Russia by providing it a lot of electronics and components. These electronics and components is something that can be used for the dual use purposes, that means both peaceful purposes as well as military purposes. And Russia urgently needs it because it is ramping up its military production and it needs a continuous supply of such kind of material. Drones are also something that has been supplied by China as well as Iran here. And also, it is not that only directly China is supplying to Russia sanctioned part, because that will also attract sanctions on China. China is using some third country or gray areas, we can say, which is referred as parallel imports. So for example, China can export some item to Kazakhstan, Kazakhstan then further export this item to Russia. So it seems that China will not be held responsible if the item is going to Russia, because they can directly claim that it was Kazakhstan where they have first exported it first to. Second is the trade volume has taken most of the trade basket you talk about is made up of energy, and economic advantage is something that also China is trying to get here, because you know that once sanction was imposed on the Russian economy, Russia's oil and gas, its demand declined significantly. It lost its traditional import partners, export partners we can say, and due to this it has a surplus of oil and gas which also it needed to sell to earn or generate revenues, to tame inflation, to ensure that everything is right at the domestic front, and also to use the money for the war purposes. And here China came to help here. For example, China has also taken advantage of the situation because Russia has no other option but to sell this oil and gas at very discounted prices, cheap prices. It is doing same for India also. So China has increased its overall oil and gas import, and it has been able to import a huge volume of discounted Russian energy. And here China has advantage as well if you compare with India, because India can only access seaborne oil from Russia, while China has a direct land border with Russia, and they already have developed and have worked upon different pipelines. So both sea-based as well as land-based we can say, or overland transportation of gas and oil is being seen here. Overall, China has seen Russia emerging as a stable resource supplier for it, and that also is advantageous because we know that China, it is a very large country, but as far as oil and gas resources are concerned, it has very limited of those, and that is why it will enhance energy security, and that is one of the dimensions of the increasing bonhomie between China and Russia. Now the question is, what is the impact on Russia and how long can it sustain the conflict? So first of all, China has come to help because it has softened the impact of sanctions that was imposed by the Western economies. Second, also it is believed that because China is continuously buying oil and gas, it has helped in a continuous supply of foreign exchange and currency to the Russian economy, and this has been used by Russia to increase and support its military spending, where it is distribution of salaries to the military personnel, or even ramping up different types of defense production. At the same time, it has, we can say, it will not be wrong to say that the help of China has proved very crucial for Russia in ensuring that its war capacity can further sustain and further can be prolonged as such. Now the question is, if such kind of relations keep on developing further and keep on strengthening further, what can be the risk for China? Now here, if you look at the contradictions, so first of all, again, the contradictions comes on the basis of what kind of stand China has taken at a global level, and at the same time, how it actually is acting practically. So first of all, narrative it has woven around itself is of a peacemaker, because China has clearly stated it does not want war to prolong, it does not want conflict to go on, and it wants both parties to come at a table and negotiate. But at the same time, de facto, if you look, practically it has been providing as much support to Russia as possible to ensure that Russian economy does not face severe repercussions because of the Western sanction. Secondly, at the same time, China also has repeatedly, especially from European partners, has faced a lot of criticism because of its stand it has taken in this particular war, and China also will have a possibility of running a trust deficit with European countries, with which it enjoys a very greater degree of trade, a higher volume of trade as such. Plus also a lot of capital is being flown, or basically we can say is invested in China from the Western countries, especially European countries. So to some extent, economy of China might be impacted if the war further drags on. Now, as far as the economic cost of China is concerned, if you look at the long-term concern, obviously it will lead to reduced Western investment, because it shows that China cannot be trusted because of its stand it has taken in the Russian war. Second, cooperation in technology sector is something that can also be at risk, because if you look at China, majority of the tech companies from America, they have invested heavily in this Chinese economy. Similarly, a lot of European countries have invested heavily. So gradually you can see the pulling of this investment and then shifting in some other countries as well. Overall, its perception will the China's perception will be seen as an unreliable partner, and that to some extent will obviously stifle the path which China has taken since few decades, that is the path of modernization and rapid economic development. At the same time, Russia also faces the risk of internal fragility, because if you look at in the Russia, which is a very large country, you have different ethnic groups residing all across Russia. So we are seeing an emerging fault line where internal pressure seems to be finally blowing up. For example, if you look at the result of war, obviously the war which was thought to last for few days or maybe few weeks by Russia, now it has entered the 4th year as such, and this has led to heavy human casualty. There are a lot of people, more than 1 million people have lost their life, especially Russian soldiers have lost their life because of the continuous investment or continuous use of resources in the in what you can call as war related expenses. Inflation and food prices also seems to have increased in past couple of years, and hidden mobilization that is being carried out by Russia is also has led to kind of internal disturbances, because it is blamed that only particular ethnic groups, especially those people who are living in the far eastern Siberian region of Russia, they are being recruited in the military in much more higher number as compared to western Russia, where you have the cities such as Moscow, St. Petersburg and all. So there is kind of differential treatment that people are claiming is being done by Russian military, and this has led to a rising what you can call as rising fear of separatism or separatist movement growing up in Russia. Regions if we talk about which is at conflict here, or basically where we can see internal rebellion growing up, is Caucasus, then we have Tatarstan and Bashkortostan region, then we have Siberia and Far East, and also in Kaliningrad enclave, because majority of war casualty, if you look in this particular war, they are from this particular region. They are basically belong to different ethnic group also. Now, China obviously has a strategic opportunity as well, and that is what China also many experts claim is looking at, and that is a window of opportunity. Because if there is a possibility of Russian disintegration, if there is a possibility of internal rebellion, internal revolt, in that case, China can further solidify and strengthen its claim on the Far East and Siberia. Yes, China actually has a claim on eastern part of Russian territory. It has always in the map also showed the Russian part as a Chinese part. Same way it claims Arunachal Pradesh as its own part. Same way it claims Taiwan as its own part. So this would also be helpful in the future, because in China, if it is able to solidify its control over these areas, it will have direct access to the Arctic Ocean or polar sea route. To understand this on map, if you look here, this is China, and this region that you see currently in the blue region, this is actually controlled by Russia. But as far as the claim of China is concerned, this entire region is claimed by China to its own part, and this actually used to be the actual China-Russia border before 1858. After 1858, this region was basically, we can say, annexed by Russia, and that is also something Chinese historian always have regretted about, always have talked about. So it might play in the benefit of Russia overall. Now, not only this, if you look at the resource from that perspective also, China will have huge control, because this entire area which it claims is rich in oil and gas, which China is lacking. Similarly, a lot of rare earth minerals also are found in these areas. You have diamonds and platinum. Not only that, even forest and fresh water is available in this area. And as you know, that large part of China is having a plateau-like structure, which is a dry, arid kind of landscape. So such kind of control over resources might be advantageous for China. So that also is one reason why China might be internally might be thinking about or might be hoping about disintegration of Russia. As such, goal overall will be to long-term global power consolidation. That is the big game or the larger game that China seems to be playing. Now we have to wait to watch and see how this entire war unfolds. But obviously, many fault lines are clearly visible as such. That is all for this particular video. If you like the video, please hit the like button, share it with fellow aspirants, as a subscribe channel for more such content. Thank you very much.